back, everybody. Today we're going over this scope that you see in my hands right here and that you probably saw in a couple rifles in the intro. This is the Vortex Viper PST Gen 2 2 to 10 by 32 first focal plane scope. So there's a mouthful there. We'll get into all those details coming up later in the video, but I'm probably going to say it 10 times in this video. However, the reason I was kind of digging this scope is I like the 2 to 10s. It's one of my favorite magnification ranges. You know, I know low power variable optics like the 1 to 6s, 1 to 8s, etc. are very popular right now. However, sometimes in order to get, you know, a good eye box or different things that those scopes tend to struggle with, you have to spend a lot of money or go with a heavier optic with a bigger tube, like a 34 or 35 millimeter tube, stuff like that. With the 2 to 10, you can keep it nice and lightweight and get good magnification, of course, and still have decent close-in capability. So I think it's a very versatile magnification range. So what we're going to do is a little bit more shooting, let the dogs take a look at it, and then we're going to get into the details of the scope itself, and at the end we'll go over what I think of it overall. Now that the dogs have blessed off on it, we'll get into the details of the scope. We'll start here at the rear and move forward. We do have a fast focus eye ring here. And what's nice about it is it's somewhat stiff to move. And I say that that's nice because wherever you set it is kind of where you want it to be and never move again. So for those who don't know, the fast focus eyepiece here is going to allow you to have the reticle appear clear to your eyes. Everybody's eyes are a little bit different, prescription's a little bit different. The way we see things in terms of astigmatism, etc. are different. So set it to where it looks clear to your eye. I recommend pointing it like at the blue sky, obviously not in the sun. And close your eyes a few times, move it around, open your eyes back up, and wherever it looks best to you, set it and leave it there. Moving forward, we have our magnification adjustment ring here. It's nice and smooth. It's not super difficult, so I do like that. It goes obviously from 2 to 10 power. And the thing I wish it had, though, is I wish it had sort of like a little tab on it that would make it a little bit quicker. But it's not horrible. I reviewed the Vortex Razor HD 1 to 6 a couple months ago, and that was one of my cons about it, was that the ring was super hard to turn. This one is not like that, so I definitely prefer this over that for sure. It has a 30 millimeter tube, which is good because 30 millimeter is probably the most common for rings and mounts, etc. out there on the market. So if you have a particular set of rings that you like or a mount, it's probably going to work with this scope. They're probably going to make a set for this for your rifle, so can't complain about that. Over here on the left side of the knob, we do have out here on the side, this is where you're going to put your battery. It's powered by a CR2032 battery, and it comes out, just use a little screwdriver or like a rim case rather, and when you do so, just hold on to this piece here, which of course is your brightness adjustment, because you don't want to turn both at the same time. It tends to be counterproductive. Settings go from 1 to 10, and what I like about it, and I say this in a ton of different optics reviews, that it has an in-between setting. So very rarely do people ever want to have it on the 1 or the 2, but sometimes people know that in a low light situation they're going to want it, say, between the 7 and 8. So you can keep it right on that spot right there, so that way you only have to turn it one position to be in the position that you want. So I definitely like that. It's relatively difficult to turn, which I like as well, because you're not going to accidentally turn it on. Say if it's in like a range bag in your car or something like that, you're not going to bump it to where it's just going to be on and you don't know it, and then when you go to use it, the battery's going to be dead. We do have our parallax adjustment here. It goes from 20 yards out to infinity, and I like the fact that it goes on to 20 yards as well, simply because I know a lot of folks like to zero at 20 or 25 and then kind of move out to where they actually want to zero it, and I mean zero, I should have said get on paper. So it's going to help you with that. It's also good for a lot of guys like to use these types of scopes on 22 caliber rifles, which I find a little bit odd, but I know folks do it. There's a lot of like rimfire challenge type stuff that goes on there in terms of competition, and having it being able to be clear at the closer in settings certainly is a good thing. The scope has exposed turrets, which I know some folks like, some folks don't like. It is what it is. I think on something that's a 2 to 10 magnification, a lot of people are going to view it as a DMR or SPR type of roll, so I do like the ability to dial in should you need to do so. So obviously we have our windage here. It's very crisp. It's very audible. Each click, you know you're making it. And as you can see there, as you move out, both with the windage and elevation, it lets you know what rotation you're on by where it indexes off that little line. So 0, of course, is all the way in, and then all the way out is 3. So same thing here with your elevation. And I also like how it has the little arrows telling you which way you're moving. Same thing here, marked R and L. It seems like a small thing, but when you're behind the gun, if you don't have to take your head out of your shooting position to see which way you're going, that's always a good thing. So these are settable, so you can basically get your 0, then take these little Allen screws out and pop it back to 0, so that way you know where your actual 0 is for the rifle that it's mounted on. It also has a 0 stop here on the elevation turret. They have a great tutorial on their YouTube page on how to set it, which is what I used when I did it, so I'm not gonna take the 5 minutes to explain it here, but it's pretty simple stuff. And then the elevation turret also has this little fiber optic piece here, which again, from behind the scope, looking down at it, you can see pretty easily if you just pick your head up just a touch, so you can see where you're at when you're dialing your elevation. Again, from your 0 point, it's going to look like that. So you're going to know that's straight on 0, and you'll know if you're off and if you need to make that adjustment. When you go to purchase this scope, one thing you're going to have to decide on is, of course, the reticle, and this one comes with both a MIL or MRAD version and the MOA version, which is what we have here. So we'll just get into it real quick. You guys should see the image up here on your screen. Basically, right in the center there, it has a fine crosshair, which is nice for zeroing, getting in that very precise point. Me personally, I have zeroed mine at 100 meters and just used the MOA system for the rifle that it was on. But you can see coming down, it's marked 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, etc., all the way down on the right side. I really like that. It's very easy to get lost in the reticle. A lot of people will say that you can get lost in the turrets if you're spinning turrets like in a competition or something like that. I would say it's just as easy to get lost in a reticle, and those little numbers allow you to know where you're holding over when you're transitioning between targets, because it definitely can happen, particularly when stress is induced, so it minimizes the likelihood with the numbers. Same thing is true there on your windage holds as well. There's no sort of like windage lines or Christmas trees type stuff that some of the more, I guess, advanced reticles, we call it, have. However, I know a lot of guys kind of like simple reticles as well, so this one would fall in line with that. When you move up the vertical line there, what you're going to see is it has some holdover positions, which is nice. So if you're shooting like down a hill, or if you're dialed in at 100 yards and something pops up at 10 yards, for example, you will have a reference point to use for that. One thing that attracted me to this scope out of the PST Viper Gen 2 line was the weight of it. So the size and the weight is pretty good for a lot of different applications, in my opinion. As you guys can see, as my scale is dying out on me, it comes in right at 27 ounces, and that's with the battery installed, and overall it's just over 12 inches long. So again, I mentioned it earlier, but sort of the SPR or DMR type of roll, I think a 2 to 10 just is a great option. One reason for that is a lot of folks will want to go with like a 1 to 8 or something like that. That's fine. However, if you go to a 1 to 8 that has a 30 millimeter tube, you're going to have some eye box type of issues. And with the 2 to 10, it just gives you so much room to play with there regarding that. Your eye relief is going to be good. I think this one's just over 3 inches in terms of eye relief, and your eye box compared to a 1 to 8 with a 30 millimeter tube is just so much more forgiving. So for those that don't know what I mean by that, is if your head isn't directly behind the scope, or you have some sort of awkward shooting position, say like under a car or from an awkward barricade, it just allows you to get the view of the reticle through the scope as it should be, much easier than something that's a little bit tighter. So I think the 2 to 10 definitely gives you some advantages. And of course you give up the 1x capability, but depending on the use of the rifle and the role of the rifle, it definitely can be an advantage. I think we covered most of the technical aspects of the scope. However, I want to talk about my experience with it. So I did request this from Vortex, and they sent it out for the review, for test and evaluation, if you will. And the first one I got in worked fine in every way besides one. It basically, when I would set the parallax, it would just be way off. So if I had it set at like 25 yards, the real parallax was at like 100 yards. If I had it set at 100 yards, the real parallax was at like 500 yards, for example. And, you know, that can be caused by user error, and I'm not above that. So what I did was unmounted it to make sure I wasn't clamping down too hard on it. I think I had the Geissele Super Precision mount in there at the time. And for those that don't know, if you mount your scope mount too hard and you over torque everything, it can bind the actual tube of the scope and actually put pressure on there and not allow the erectors mechanisms to move. So I wanted to make sure I wasn't doing that. I completely unmounted it, just went out in my backyard in the lake and played with it, again, with no mount on there. And I was having the same issue. So I called Vortex, and a person answers the phone, so that's good. So just talk to a real person who's in America, and described the problem I was having to them. And they said, yep, sounds like something's off. Just we'll get your call tag and send it back in, and we'll get it fixed. So sent it back in. They sent, again, the shipping label, paid for shipping. Went back in. I had it back, I think, within a week and a half-ish, probably a week and a half. And in my case, they had a note in there. They didn't say what the problem was with the scope. All it said was customer reported issue could not be resolved. And they had a new scope in the box. So that's this one right here. I've had this one in for a few months, and it works perfectly. There's no issues with it at all. The parallax works as it should. The turrets track as they should. There's, again, no issues in that regard. So good to go there. I just wanted to report that in terms of the customer service experience. Seemed pretty good. So if you have to use it, which obviously we don't want to have to use it, but if you do, they're there for you. So that's cool. Let's talk optical clarity, because that's always something that there's absolutely no way I can tell you through a camera here. Even if I take pictures of the actual, you know, the lenses and the reticle and stuff like that, you're taking those photos through a bunch of camera lenses, and then you guys are viewing it through the lens that I'm recording this camera on, and then you're viewing it through a screen that the computer or phone that you're watching this is on. So it's really hard to convey clarity. So I will tell you this. I've used their really high-end scopes. So Vortex makes awesome stuff that's like, you know, for $3,500 and more. And I've also used a lot of their budget line stuff. And this is definitely better than their budget line stuff, and it's not as good in terms of particularly edge-to-edge clarity as their like $3,500 scopes, which are awesome, by the way. But for something in this price point, and I guess we'll discuss price point, I think the MSRP is $1,149 if I remember offhand. And looking around, street price, you can find them for like $849 to $900. We'll put a link down below if anybody's looking to pick one up. So at that price point, I think it's very competitive, as good as most and better than many. It's very good. I've never had a problem distinguishing what I'm looking at. And what I mean by that is you're looking down range at some scopes, especially when you're out 700-800 yards-ish, regardless of magnification level, that's when you start to see issues in terms of like, is that a branch or is that a deer antler, if that makes sense. So in terms of clarity and details you get with your image, it's been very good. Can't complain about that at all. Is the reticle daylight bright? Again, that's relative. Some folks think if it illuminates at all during the day and you can pick up the difference between black, then it's daylight bright. Some folks want like aim point red dot bright. I'm just gonna roll on a picture here real quick. You guys can see this is like brightest day possible, and that is on the 10 setting, so you guys can make the call if it's daylight bright or not. Either way, it has an etched reticle, so the reticle itself is etched. So there's no way, like in the old scopes that used to actually have pieces that were in there that could move around that made the reticle, that cannot happen on this type of scope. So regardless, even if your battery runs out, and say, hypothetically saying like a tactical type situation, you're on your 2 power and you hit your weapon light and you go to engage, that reticle will be there no matter what. So that is good. I think that's pretty much it. Oh yeah, it is made in the Philippines, folks. I was asked about that. It is not made in America. However, the people you talk to at customer service are in America and speak English, probably other languages too, who knows. So that is good. If you guys have any questions about the scope, you can always post down below in the comment section as always. However, if you really need an answer, the best place to get me is over at my Facebook page, because I do see the messages over there, whereas I don't always see them on YouTube, Full30, or elsewhere. So that's pretty much it, guys. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And thanks to Vortex for sending this out for the review. Appreciate it. And I hope to see all of you in the next video.